So there was one question that was sent in from somebody online, and so I'll answer that, and some of you may have questions as well, so we can deal with that first before we carry on. Okay, so this is a question from David, who says, "My deeply committed 3-year partner left me, and my caring grandmother fell down a flight of stairs. Sometimes it feels too difficult to be even kind to myself, to be kind even to myself. How can I help us?" When we do have suffering, mental or physical or both, and if our suffering is quite strong and intense and unbearable, it's fine to seek help. You know, talk to somebody, talk to a friend or a therapist, go for a massage, eat ice cream, cry. Okay, so, sometimes we just need to do those things to relieve the heavy level of suffering that we're experiencing. However, those things they can just sort of give some temporary relief. They don't really eliminate the suffering. They don't get to the real root, the cause of the suffering. And so when you're ready to do that, when you're ready to kind of look deeper into suffering, then the Buddhist way is to go into our mind and look at what's going on in our mind, what kind of thoughts, what kind of attitudes, what kind of stories our mind is telling. For example, just looking at our attitude about suffering. What is our way of relating to suffering? Do we have this attitude that, yeah, I know that there's terrible things happening in the world, terrible things happening to other people. I'm really sorry about that, and I wish I could help. Is there anything I can do? But when it comes to ourself, we feel, no, not me. Bad things shouldn't happen to me. They happen to other people, but they shouldn't happen to me. I know that's my that's my way of reacting. And once, when I was talking about this with a group of people, somebody said, instead of saying "why me," we should say "why not me." But that's not what we do. We do tend to think, "Why me? Why does this have to happen to me?" So, in the Buddhist way of thinking, suffering is part of life. It's there. We can't expect to go through life and not encounter suffering. Everybody encounters suffering, even the millionaires, the billionaires, the celebrities, the beautiful people, the rich and famous people. Don't think they don't have suffering. They do. If we were to follow them around, make ourselves invisible and follow them around 24 hours a day, we would see lots of suffering. They have problems too. Just having a body, just having this kind of human body means we're subject to hunger and thirst and cold and pain and discomfort and getting sick and getting old and eventually dying. I mean, that happens to everybody, whether you're a billionaire or you're a homeless person. So everybody has suffering. So it's better, instead of railing against suffering, why me, to just slowly, gradually come to accept it is inevitable. It is something that will happen to us. And then the problem isn't so much about what is happening out there, these bad things happening to me. It's more about how we deal with them. What is going on in our own mind, our way of responding, our way of dealing with the things that happen to us. And that's where we can make a difference. That's where we can do things, by working with our thoughts, our feelings, our attitudes, the stories that our mind tells. And so if our thoughts are not very skillful uh, or helpful, and if they are negative, well, we can do something about that. It is possible to work on those, to change those. We can learn to think differently, to see things differently. And it's even possible to turn your mind around, and instead of feeling miserable and poor me, we can even come to see problems as beneficial and useful. And it's said, one of my teachers says, bodhisattvas are those who are working for enlightenment, for awakening. They want to become Buddhas to help all living beings. So they're very compassionate, very altruistic, very hardworking beings. And so my teacher said, bodhisattvas like problems, just the way we like ice cream. Hard to believe. When it comes to ice cream, we're like, oh boy. But when it comes to suffering and problems, oh no. So to actually be able to say, oh boy, to problems and suffering, I'm certainly not there yet. But I can understand how it's possible to get to that point, because if you really understand the benefit, the value of working with problems, and the idea is, and there's a whole body of teachings in Tibetan Buddhism at least, about how to work with suffering, how to work with problems, and actually use them in the spiritual path, like transforming problems into the path, into your practice, so that you grow further along the path, you get closer to enlightenment. So if you learn about that and think about that, you can get to the point where, yeah, problems, they're great. They're really helpful. They're really useful. They'll help me to get enlightened more quickly, and then I can help sentient beings more quickly. So I'm still not there, but I can at least appreciate that is possible. But that doesn't mean we don't try to find solutions to our problems, because there's a wonderful text that Venerable Children is teaching on Thursday mornings by a great Indian master, Shantideva, and sometimes it's called Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. What is the translation here? Engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds. Anyway, so that text is full of wonderful advice about how to be a Bodhisattva. And there's one verse in there which I love. It's so helpful. And it goes something like, what is the use of being unhappy about something if there is a remedy? And what is the use of being unhappy if there's no remedy? And so the way I use that, when I can remember to, is to, okay, there's a problem, there's an unpleasant situation going on, is to say, okay, is there something I can do about it? Like, be practical. Is there a remedy, a solution that I can at least try to alleviate this problem or make this problem go away? So if there is something that can be done, do it. Don't just sit around moping, feeling unhappy, feeling sorry for yourself, because, does that do any good? Does it do any good to, oh, poor me, oh, this is so awful, oh, suffering. That doesn't help at all. It just makes you suffer more rather than less. And so instead of doing that, be practical. Okay, can I do something? Is there something that can be done? Sometimes there is. Sometimes there is something you can do, or at least try. So try to find a solution. And it may work, and it may not, but at least you try. And then the second part is, if there is no remedy, if there is no solution, if there's nothing that can be done about it, what use is it to be unhappy? To just let your mind keep thinking again and again about how terrible it is, oh, poor me. Does that do any good? Does that help? So instead, it's better to just accept it. Okay, this problem is here. I can't do anything. We may not be able to eliminate the suffering or the problem, but there's still things we can do on a spiritual level. We can meditate, we can pray, we can, um, lots of practices, spiritual practices we can do to at least make our mind better, put our mind in a better state. So that's a very helpful piece of advice, and it's kind of similar to the Serenity Prayer in Alcoholics Anonymous, which goes something like, maybe somebody knows it better than me.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Yeah, I really like that. We could say Buddha instead of God, or the universe. But yeah, three things there. So being able to accept what can't be changed, having the courage to change what can be changed, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's very, very useful, very practical in dealing with problems. And just in line with that, to sort of illustrate that, I once met this young woman who told me a very kind of tragic thing that happened to her. She came home one day to find that her boyfriend that she'd been living with just disappeared. He left, took all his stuff, and didn't even leave a note saying where he was going or why he left. So that must have been pretty distressing. And then shortly after that, she found out from one of the boyfriend's friends that he'd had AIDS. Her boyfriend had AIDS, but he never told her. She went for a blood test and found out that she was HIV positive. And she was only in her early 20s, and she was devastated. She felt like she had a death sentence. And she said she spent the next 2 weeks at home crying, and then sort of realized this isn't helpful. Like, this isn't doing any good. And she thought, well, I'm still alive and I can take medicine and I might have more years to live, and I can do things, I can help people. So she kind of roused herself from this miserable state that she was in. And when I met her, she just looked like beautiful, radiant. She was just so compassionate, and really, she came to a course that I was teaching, and she said she was learning, about Buddhism, meditation, healing methods. She really wanted to help people. So I thought that was remarkable, without reading Shantideva or any, but just on her own, just recognizing that, you know, focusing on your problem and your suffering and feeling miserable about that doesn't do any good at all. And instead, she, reminded herself of what she did have, the positive things she did have in her life, and generated this wish to use her life, however much time she had, to do things that were beneficial. So I was quite impressed that she came to that on her own. And yeah, so there's lots of very helpful methods in Buddhism, and I want to recommend this book, nice little book by Thich Nhat Hanh, called No Mud, No Lotus, The Art of Transforming Suffering. And so it's full of very down-to-earth, practical advice on how to deal with suffering, how to deal with problems. And just right at the beginning here it says, most people are afraid of suffering, but suffering is a kind of mud to help the lotus flower of happiness grow. There can be no lotus flower without the mud. So the lotus flower is used as a kind of symbol for enlightenment, awakening, the state that the Buddha reached, because they're beautiful flowers. When you see lotuses, they're like very pure and very beautiful, even though they grow in mud. And that's the only way they can grow. I think they can't grow in nice, clean dirt or, whatever. They have to have dirty, yucky mud ponds to grow. And so they're rooted in the mud, but then they rise up above the surface and open up in this beautiful, pristine flower. So the idea is, an enlightened being like the Buddha starts off in the mud of the world, with all the suffering and all the problems and all the afflictions and negative things in the world, but rises up above the world and attains this very pure, perfect state of mind of awakening and enlightenment. And you actually need the world and the suffering and the problems and the afflictions, the negativities of the world to be able to reach enlightenment, by knowing how to deal with all the suffering, how to deal with all the pain and the problems and the negativities, learning how to transform those, rise above them, transcend them. That's how you reach enlightenment. You can't reach enlightenment without going through all those kind of problems and difficulties. And so that probably takes a while to understand. It's good to study more about Buddhism to understand how that works. But that's how a bodhisattva can get to the point of welcoming problems, saying, "Oh boy, another problem," because they know that this will help them reach enlightenment. So anyway, so that's a nice little book, and there's lots of other books as well on the topic of transforming suffering. Lojong, the Tibetan term meaning mind training or mind transformation. That's the sort of general topic, and there's lots of books on that topic. So look into that. And then there are a couple of suggestions of other obstacles to being kind. That came in. One was ignorance, the inability to understand. And that reminded me, Thich Nhat Hanh also talks about that when dealing with a difficult person, someone who might be making us angry, who might be doing harmful things, and finding it hard to be patient and kind to that person. So he says it's very helpful to try to understand the other person, what's going on with them. What's driving them to be this way? They're probably suffering. Yeah, when people are, their minds are peaceful and calm and happy and full of positive thoughts and feelings, that's not the time when they do nasty things, hurtful things, make war, commit murder. It's when there's suffering inside. There's confusion and afflictive emotions and ignorance and all kinds of stuff going on inside, a very troubled, turbulent state of mind. That's when people do harmful things or negative things. So if you can understand that, then it opens the door, opens the mind for compassion, being able to have compassion and the wish to help the person instead of anger and wanting to, get back at them. So understanding is very, very helpful. And also, in general, understanding the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma. So that is tremendously helpful to have a better understanding of what suffering is, why it happens, what are its causes, and how it's possible to eliminate suffering by eliminating the causes. I mean, we can't do that all at once, but gradually we can reduce creating the causes of suffering, and in that way reduce suffering. And so understanding that gives hope and optimism and courage and, energy to do those things rather than just, moping and crying and feeling miserable. Another obstacle to kindness is a wrong view that kindness is contradictory to self-benefit. For example, thinking that being kind can lead you to being taken advantage of. So yeah, I think that's a common idea that, if you're nice to people, they'll walk all over you and use you, and it's kind of true. I mean, it could be true. It could be true. But it also maybe points to a misunderstanding about kindness. Being kind, being compassionate, being helpful to people doesn't mean we always have to say yes. Every time somebody asks us to do something or give them something, we don't always have to say yes, especially if you're a parent. You should know that. you, bringing up children, you can't say yes all the time. That wouldn't be good for them. So, yeah, we do need to use wisdom. So we need to balance kindness and compassion with intelligence, with wisdom, knowing, what is helpful and what is not helpful. And sometimes saying yes, giving in to people's requests and demands isn't helpful. It may not be helpful for them. And it also may not be helpful for us. We do need to take care of ourselves. If we're always saying yes to everything, we'll end up being burned out. And then we'll need other people to carry us away and take care of us. So we do need to, be aware of our own limitations, our abilities, and keep that in mind and not overload ourselves. And so we need to apply wisdom and intelligence, and it's okay to say no if we need to take care of ourselves, take care of our energy, so that we continue to have energy and health to do the things we need to do and to do our Dharma practice and be able to help others. So saying no doesn't mean a lack of kindness. We can say no, but still have kindness in our heart. So something I was going to talk about this morning, but ran out of time because we were talking about things that can obstruct us from being kind. And I read something from Tara Brach's article about our physiological factors that mean we're primed to be kind. And after that, she says, so we have these natural capacities to feel kindness, but then she says, so what blocks us from cultivating these capacities? We spend many moments of our day in a trance that arises from the perception of separateness and a feeling that something is wrong. This experience gives rise to the emotions of fear, shame, and anger. When caught in the trance of separation, the limbic system, going back to physiology, the limbic system and the more primitive parts of our brain are overriding the parts of our brain that need to be activated to feel love. Survival emotions are there for a good reason. We need to scan our environments and respond when there is danger. We are predisposed to remember painful things, the wounding that happened, and not to remember the pleasant moments from our past. We are like Velcro for the negative experiences and Teflon for the good. So I don't know who made that up, but I read it before in Buddha's Brain, Rick Hansen. Yeah, so neuroscientists say that, this is how our brain works. When it comes to bad experiences, bad things, they really stick to our mind, our brain, and it's very hard to forget them. But when it comes to pleasant experiences and nice things, they just slide right off like Teflon. She goes on to say, yet we can lock into an ongoing sense of something is wrong and chronic emotional reactivity. Often when we grow up in difficult family or social circumstances, we develop a nervous system that has a hard time with intimacy because we're fixated on detecting what might go wrong and protecting ourselves. We spend many moments in judgment and reactivity, defending ourselves or being aggressive in order to control what feels to be a threatening world. So does that sound familiar? Sometimes, at least. And then she goes on to say, we begin to awaken from this trance when we notice the patterns of thoughts and emotions that keep us feeling separate, unsafe, and deficient. And so she says it's really good to pay attention to our thoughts and our feelings and our experiences, especially in our encounters with other people, and just try to recognize what's going on. Not in a judgmental way, in a critical way, but just to notice what is happening in my mind. Because if we don't notice those things, then they're happening and we're just acting on automatic and not able to change. But once we can notice what's going on, then we have more possibility of changing. So she recommends reflecting on encounters that we have with people and asking ourselves, did I want to appear a certain way to prove something? Or did I want to get something like approval from the other person? How did you want that person to experience you? Were you trying to avoid being judged for something? Was there an underlying belief that you were inadequate or that the other was threatening to you? So these are some of the things we can look for. Yeah. And they may be things that have been there a long time, our whole life, and we just never notice them. So noticing, becoming aware of those kind of thoughts and feelings is the first step in being able to change. It gives us the freedom, the possibility of making some changes. Yeah, just a little bit about that. And then, so this morning I introduced this meditation on kindness. You did it during yeah. And just before we ended, I did mention kindness for oneself, because it's not specifically mentioned here. Did you include that? Oh, good. Yeah. Because in traditional explanations, at least in the Tibetan tradition, you don't come across that idea of meditating on kindness for yourself. And it seems like, well, I did read something that Dalai Lama said that part of it is terminology. And the terminology in Tibet, like Tibetan terms for kindness, compassion, love, and so on, it's included in there. It's understood that when you cultivate those qualities, you include yourself. It's not just for others. So perhaps that's one reason they don't need specifically to meditate on kindness for themselves. They also have, it just seems that they receive a lot of love and kindness from their parents, from their mothers and fathers. And growing up at Tibet, it wasn't such a busy culture. It was didn't have TV and movies and so on. Families were probably a lot closer, spent more time with each other. So I think children probably received a lot more nurturing and love and kindness, and that enabled them to grow up feeling good about themselves and not hating themselves like a lot of Western people do. But anyway, so it's not, kindness for oneself isn't usually mentioned in traditional explanations of loving kindness and compassion, but contemporary teachers usually do talk about it, because there are so many people who are not kind to themselves and even hate themselves. And so when you are doing meditation on kindness and compassion and so on, you do need to include yourself. And where you include yourself, that depends on what works best for you. Like some recommend starting with yourself. First develop kindness or compassion for yourself, and then go on to, family and friends and so on. But one teacher said, but that could be very difficult to do. If you've never learned how to be kind to yourself, then having to start with that could become discouraging. And so he said, maybe it's better to put yourself at the end, because after cultivating kindness for all these other people, maybe your heart is really open and warm, and then it will be easier to feel kindness for yourself. So I think you can experiment. Everyone's different. So experiment and find what way works best for you. But just, don't leave yourself out. Don't continue beating yourself up. And just to read something from Volume 5 of the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, this book I mentioned earlier called In Praise of Great Compassion. So there's a section there about love for oneself. So it says, like self-respect, loving ourselves in a realistic and practical way is important. Self-love must be distinguished from self-indulgence. Self-indulgence is fraught with selfish attachment and leads to anxiety and guilt, whereas loving ourselves involves caring for ourselves with acceptance and kindness that are free from unrealistic expectations. So this could be one reason why some people are uncomfortable about the idea of loving themselves. They may think, oh, isn't that selfish? Isn't that egotistical? Isn't that, just indulging myself? They may see it as a negative thing. So it's good to see there's a difference between self-indulgence, which is selfish, egotistical, and self-kindness. With self-indulgence, we might have unrealistic expectations. So I was thinking of some like, I should never make a mistake. I should never oversleep. I should be active doing Dharma practice and work for sentient beings all day long and never get tired. So we do sometimes do this. We put a lot of expectations, a lot of shoulds on ourselves, and that's not helpful. So with loving ourselves, we are kind to ourselves. We don't put these unrealistic expectations. We are a sentient being, and like all others, we seek happiness. Self-indulgence involves thinking we must fulfill all our worldly wishes. Self-centeredness is believing that our happiness is more important than anyone else's. So that's not self-love, that's selfishness. Genuine self-love enables us to love others, while self-centeredness uses others for our own pleasure. So these are some of the differences that we can use to distinguish if we're being genuinely loving and caring to ourselves, or we're just being self-centered. Self-love cares for self and others in an expansive way and enables us to live harmoniously with others. At its most exalted levels, genuine love and compassion for ourselves wish us to be free from cyclic existence, samsara, which is part of the Buddhist path, freeing ourselves from all our suffering and the causes of suffering, and then attaining full awakening. So that's the highest form of self-love and self-compassion. I don't deserve to be stuck in samsara, to suffer and have all this, negativity in myself. I deserve to be free of all of this. I deserve to attain liberation and to attain awakening. And I'm going to do that. That's the best thing I can do for myself. So that's like self-love, self-compassion. We need to feel that we deserve that and put our energy into that. So she says, working toward these spiritual goals is true kindness to ourselves, and it brings about the joy of others as well. So, yeah, just know that that is something we need to work on, even if it is hard. And again, I think you can find lots of resources on how to be more loving and compassionate to yourself if that is an issue. Okay, so then the next slide is about the benefits of loving kindness. And this is really helpful because it does take effort. We do have to spend time and energy. If we want to build up our kindness muscle, we have to go to the gym, have to work out. It's not just going to happen by itself or just by wishing for it or asking the Buddha, please make me a kind person. So we have to do certain things to make ourselves more kind. But if we understand how beneficial it is, if we can see that it's a good thing to do, it's good for others, of course, but it's also good for ourselves. We'll get a lot out of being more kind, then that will give us more enthusiasm, more energy, more joyful effort, and not be so lazy. So, first, there's some things that are mentioned in Buddhist scriptures. We'll have a happier mind. We can see that for ourselves. I mean, don't you feel good when you're loving and kind as opposed to angry and mean and nasty? So it makes our mind more happy, and then our body will be healthier as well. So negative attitudes like anger and hatred and selfishness and greed and so on, these are actually harmful for our health. So our physical health will be better as well if our mind is more positive. The next one is others will love you. You will be loved. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want to be loved, cared for, appreciated, and then also help and protect? So when we need help or when we need protection, the people will be there for us. And we don't have to ask them. I mean, if we are a loving, caring, kind person, then people will appreciate us just naturally and want to protect us and want to help us. That would just come from them, from their side, spontaneously. Next is good sleep. One reason that we have difficulty falling asleep is anger, thoughts of anger and negative thoughts about other people and what they've done or what they didn't do that they should have done. And so those kind of thoughts and feelings can keep us awake at night, make it hard for us to fall asleep. And even if we do fall asleep, we may wake up in the middle of the night thinking those thoughts and not be able to get back to sleep. And so if we make a habit of having more loving, positive, kind thoughts towards other people, then our mind will be more calm and peaceful. And it'll be easier to go to sleep. And our dreams will be pleasant rather than scary and horrible. And we'll wake up feeling refreshed. Next one is you will look radiant and relaxed, and you will be able to communicate easily with others. So we can see that with people who are very loving and kind, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Children, and people who have that as part of their personality, their way of being. They look smiling and radiant and relaxed and happy, joyful. And their way of communicating with others will be easy. Now, it may take time. Don't expect that's going to happen right away. But the more you work on thinking of others, kindness, altruism, compassion, and so on, then gradually this kind of transformation will happen. I often feel when I see a person, just in their eyes, the way people's eyes appear, you can kind of see kindness there. So it shows up in their eyes and facial expression and sometimes even the body language, as opposed to somebody who tends to be very uptight, angry a lot, tense, self-centered. So they have a different appearance, different eyes, different expression on their face. So how do we want to look? What kind of appearance do we want to have? Okay, the next one is calm mind, better concentration, more efficient. So again, if we have a habit of being more angry and having a lot of negative thoughts about other people and so on, then that's very agitating. Makes the mind very turbulent and agitated rather than calm and peaceful. And so then it's an interference in meditation. If you sit down and try to meditate, usually that involves concentrating on something, the breath or mantra or visualization or some analysis that you're doing. There's always something that we have as the object of our meditation that we want to concentrate on. So one of the reasons it's hard to concentrate, the mind keeps running away, is anger. Anger is a huge distraction. You probably noticed. If you're angry at somebody, somebody did something to you earlier that day or the day before, it's very hard to stop thinking about it. Mind keeps going over it again and again, replaying that scene. So it's a big hindrance, a big distraction in meditation, interfering with our ability to concentrate. So that applies to meditation, but also other things that we may have to do, like jobs, work that we have to accomplish. Anger can cause our mind to be distracted and make it harder for us to get our work done, or at least get it done properly. We're more likely to make a mistake, make a boo-boo because of anger. So it helps our mind to be more calm and concentrated. And then at the time of death, when we come to the end of our life, if we have worked on our kindness muscle and really made ourselves familiar with kindness and caring and compassion and altruism, then it will be easier to have those kinds of thoughts in our mind as we're dying. And from the Buddhist point of view, that is really important because, as you probably know, Buddhism says death isn't the end of everything. It's just like a gateway to another life. So after we die, our mind will leave this body and then take another rebirth in another body. And there's a very complicated explanation that Venerable has been going through in the Friday night teachings about how that whole process happens. But basically, we have a lot of karmic seeds on our mind from our actions, both good actions and bad actions. And the kind of thoughts we have, the kind of emotions we have as we are dying, provide kind of nourishing to those karmic seeds, so that one of those karmic seeds will be ripened and bring the next life. And so if we're dying with negative thoughts in our mind, if we're feeling angry or attached, a lot of people die, clinging to their things, their possessions, their family, their body, don't want to die. Or fear, we have a lot of fear at the time of death, then those kinds of thoughts and feelings are not good, not conducive. They're more likely to ripen one of our negative karmic seeds, bad karmic seeds, and then that can bring an unfortunate rebirth in the next life, which we definitely want to avoid. On the other hand, if we can die with positive thoughts in our mind, feeling love, kindness, compassion for the people around us, for the people we're leaving behind, caring about them, and ready to let go, not clinging, but realizing, okay, it's time to go, and being unattached to our things and so on. So non-anger, non-attachment, and just as many positive thoughts and feelings as we can have at that time. So those kinds of thoughts and feelings will nurture one of our good karmic seeds, and that will be the cause for a fortunate rebirth. So if we familiarize ourselves with kindness, compassion, altruism, caring about others during our life, then it'll be easy, natural to have those kinds of thoughts and feelings in our mind as we're dying. And so Western research over the I guess recent decades, they have also done some research into kindness and compassion. And the research confirms a lot of these. So there's a book called A Fearless Heart by Thupten Jinpa, Dalai Lama's translator, and it's about this compassion training program that was developed at Stanford University with Thupten Jinpa and James Doty, I think, some professor at Stanford. Anyway, they developed this 8-week program to train people in compassion in a secular way. You don't have to be Buddhist to do this, but just like people in the helping professions who wanted to be more compassionate. So it's been very successful. So that book is about how they developed that program and some of the main components and elements of that program. And so at one point he mentions the findings of research on compassion. So I'll just read some of these. Getting the helper's high. So it feels good to help others. And there's physiological reasons for that because we have more endorphins. There's more endorphins in our system, and those make us feel good, feel happy. And then feeling more useful and having a greater sense of purpose in life. So a lot of people feel useless, depressed, life is meaningful, there's no reason to live, or I'm hopeless, I can't do anything. So having more compassion and kindness and acting in that way with others, like offering service, offering kindness to others, will give us a greater sense of purpose in life. We feel useful. Yeah, so that's good for us physically and mentally. Less stress, so more kindness and compassion will help us have less stress, because stress often arises from being overly concerned with me. Number one. And so when we're focused more on others rather than oneself, then less stress. And kindness is contagious. So research shows that when people do acts of kindness, other people who see them or hear about them will be motivated to also do acts of kindness. We probably notice that ourselves. When we see somebody doing something kind, then we feel, oh, what a nice thing to do. And then we might find ourselves doing nice things too. And so then it can have a ripple effect. One person does an act of kindness, 10 other people see it, and they do acts of kindness, and then another 10 people, and pretty soon, maybe hundreds of acts of kindness are inspired by that first one. And so that means more people will be benefited by those acts of kindness, and the person doing the acts of kindness benefits. So in short, we'll be happier and healthier. So it's good to know that there's research. It's nice, Buddha said these things, Nagarjuna said these things, but it's nice to have some concrete Western research confirming him. Okay, so now there's another way of learning to be more kind, generating more kindness, and that is by thinking of the kindness of others. So I think you did a meditation already on that this morning. This is a really, really wonderful kind of practice, a very effective way of opening our hearts to others, feeling gratitude for them, for what they have done for us, and then wanting to treat them with kindness. And it's said that the best example of the kind of kindness that we are trying to develop towards others is the mother, the kindness that a mother shows for her child. I guess that's, traditionally it's the mother who does the most care for the child. Nowadays, fathers are taking a more active role in caring for children, sometimes even more than the mother, maybe. But anyway, mother or father, take your pick. And so we are advised to think about our own mother. I think most of the time mothers are really loving and caring. There are some cases of mothers who are neglectful, not very loving or caring, and then there's stories of mothers who are even abusive and cruel. I've heard some horrible stories of that, but I can't help but think that that is the exception rather than the rule. I don't know if anyone's ever done research on this, but I do think probably most mothers are loving and kind and caring. But in case your mother was one of the exceptions and didn't show you much kindness, or maybe was abusive, you can think of somebody else. You don't have to think of your mother. There must have been somebody who did show you kindness like that of a mother. So you can replace that, put that person in place of your mother. But anyway, it's really helpful to think that once upon a time we were like this, like the baby. Yeah. And I don't think most of the time people don't remember. Does anyone remember being a baby? Yeah, you remember? Remember being a baby? Wow, what do you remember?
First of all, I remember potty training.
You remember what?
Potty training,
Oh, okay.
both my brother and myself. But I also remember them standing over me, looking at me in a crib,
Wow.
backed by um, two large windows into the motorhome that we lived in.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I don't remember much. And the older I get, the less I remember. But anyway, if we can't have actual memories of being an infant and being cared for by our parents, we can use our imagination. So we can just imagine ourselves being a baby, and what our mother must have done for us. So looking at other mothers and what they do for their children. If you yourself have been a mother, you can use your own experience for that. But otherwise, just looking at other mothers and incredible energy taking care of a child. It's probably like a 24-hour-a-day job, because even at night, what I've heard is the baby wakes up several times during the night. Every couple of hours, the baby wakes up crying, hungry. So the mother doesn't even get a good night's sleep. Probably the father, too. He probably wakes up, too. But it's usually the mother that has to go and feed the baby. And that takes some time, and then go back to bed, sleep a little bit, and then the next time. So probably for the first year or more, mother doesn't get a good night's sleep. And then all day long, just caring for the baby's needs, feeding the baby, and then holding the baby, because babies need attention and love and don't like to be left alone. And then after feeding, then it comes out the other end as poop and pee. And then the mother has to clean that up, change their diapers. When I was a kid, there were no Pampers. So the mom had to use cloth diapers, wash them out, put them in the washing machine. She must have had a huge pile of diapers to clean them. And bathing the baby and dressing it and so on and so forth. So much time and energy taking care of a baby. So just to contemplate that we were like that. We were in that kind of situation as that little baby. And our mother and whoever else may have helped, grandma or aunts or older siblings or whoever helped to take care of us, just to contemplate that and just get a sense of, wow, they did that for me. Because if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have survived. Like, just to contemplate how helpless, how vulnerable a little baby is. Like, all they can do, all we could do at that point in our life was lie on our back, sometimes move our hands and feet in the air, cry, sleep, eat, pee, and poo. That's it. Those are the only things we can do. And so just to survive that stage of our life, we were totally dependent on other people. There were people who were there for us, who took care of us, who enabled us to get through that stage and grow up and be where we are today. So just to contemplate that is very, very powerful. And then just not just for the first year of our life, but year after year after year. And also our mothers are, mother and father are our first teachers. Like now we can talk and we can walk and we can dress ourselves and eat, feed ourselves. But we didn't know how to do those things in the beginning. We had to be taught. And probably, it took a great deal of patience on the part of our parents to teach us those things. And so they taught us these really basic skills that now we can do without thinking. So it's a really beautiful meditation. Maybe you could do it tomorrow, thinking about the kindness of the mother. Or yeah, so beautiful. Another thing I find helpful to think is that mothers don't get paid. There's no salary. Usually, people don't work unless they get a salary. Well, here this different, but most of the time, most places in the world, people want to get paid for the work that they do. But mothers don't get paid, right? If they did, thinking about it, all the overtime, days and nights and weekends, 365 days a year, wow, they'd be rich. But yeah, they do all that work on a volunteer basis, just out of love. Like, I love this picture because this mother really does look loving. She loves her baby. It's very clear. And I know my mother was like that too. She just loved having babies. She didn't mind all the work and all the mess and all the smell and not getting paid for it. She didn't complain. She just loved being a mother. Very, very powerful, very helpful to contemplate that. And then there are other examples of kindness as well from that we have received from other people. Okay, so parents and other caregivers, so we can extend it to other people who took care of us, who were there for us when we were small. And then teachers as well. Now we know how to read and write, and we have a lot of knowledge, and we have skills we can use to have a job and live independently, take care of ourselves. But we didn't have that knowledge when we were born. We came into the world with nothing in our heads. We couldn't even talk. So all the knowledge we have and all the skills we have are due to the kindness of our teachers. So it's also good to contemplate that. And being a teacher is not easy. It takes a great deal of effort and energy and patience. And they don't get paid very well either, right? Not very good salaries. So thinking about our teachers, and then other people, those who provide our food, clothes, shelter, medical care. And so everything that we have in our life, all the things that keep us alive, comfortable, healthy, happy, all of those things are provided by other people. And they use the expression the kindness of others in the teachings. And that doesn't mean that, for example, the farmers who grow our food, they're not out there in the field thinking, oh, I'm going to grow this wheat so that Sangye Kadro can have bread or pasta or whatever. I'm doing it just for her. With this great feeling of kindness in their hearts. So it doesn't mean that. I mean, we never meet most of those people who grow our food and make our clothes and so on. So it doesn't literally mean they are doing those things out of kindness just for us, but rather we're thinking more of how we benefit from the work that they do. Yeah, they put in a lot of time and a lot of energy and often go through hardship. I mean, being a farmer, that must be really hard work and time consuming as well. And so they do all that work and we benefit. If they didn't do that work, where would we be? Yeah? So that's the point, just to appreciate how we are dependent on others, how others do so much for us. And that's the meaning of the kindness of others. And then the next bullet point says, those who provide opportunities for learning and practicing the Dharma. So going beyond just our basic needs like food, clothing, shelter, and so on, if we value the Dharma, we've studied the Dharma, practiced the Dharma, the spiritual path, and we aspire to attain higher goals, good rebirths in our next life, future lives, liberation from suffering, enlightenment, awakening, and so on. So if we're aspiring for those kind of goals, we can't do it without others. We can't do it just independent all by myself. I'm going to do this. We need others. They provide opportunities for us to learn and practice the Dharma. I mean, just to learn the Dharma, we need to learn it from other people. So the teachers and the people who write the books and publish the books and make the programs, lots of people involved in the learning, the whole learning of the Dharma. And then the practicing, to practice the Dharma, one of the basic practices is ethical conduct, which means refraining from negative actions, non-virtuous actions like killing, stealing, lying, and so on, all those non-virtuous actions. So we have to train ourselves to not do those and do opposite virtuous actions. And most of those actions are done in relation to other people. Yeah? Killing means killing somebody else, killing another person, another being. So when we realize, no, that's not a good thing to do. I don't want to do that. I'm going to stop doing that. We need others as objects that we could kill, but we choose not to. We decide not to, out of compassion, out of kindness and consideration. And the same with stealing. We can't steal our own things. Stealing is taking away somebody else's things. So that means there has to be other people who have property that we could steal, but we choose not to. I am not going to steal that person's camera or wallet because I respect them and I know that's a bad thing to do. So with go through the 10 non-virtuous actions, as far as I can remember, they all involve others. Well, maybe wrong views. Wrong views is a little different. But most of them involve others. So to be able to consciously refrain from non-virtuous actions that we could do, but we choose not to do, we need others. So we need others to be able to practice ethical conduct. And we also need others to practice generosity. That's another important quality to develop. Giving. I mean, giving really isn't giving to ourselves. We have to give to others. That's the real meaning of giving. And then patience, compassion, love, kindness, all these qualities are done in relation to others. So we need others as objects or recipients of these positive qualities so that we can develop them, grow them, increase them more and more. So we need others to practice the Dharma and progress along the path. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm just going through this really quickly, but it's useful to really spend time reflecting on these things. And the more you do, the more you feel your heart is opening to others and you feel closer to others, appreciative, grateful, and then that helps you to be more kind. So it says, then we are dependent on others for everything we have, use, own, and enjoy. So, it's good to just take one object, my computer, for example, which I spend so much time with and I treasure so much, my computer, or your phone, or whatever, your car, and then just contemplate, where did this come from? Okay, so it was made in a factory. There were people in the factory working. And even the materials, they had to put the materials together. So they were made in other factories, the glass and the wires and the screws and I don't know what all the things are in a computer. But there's probably hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people involved in making this computer. And then the internet, people who work to provide the internet, that we can go online and find out information and send emails and so on and so forth. So just taking anything we have in our life that's important to us, that's useful to us, and then contemplate, where did this come from? We realize, wow, I am dependent on others. So then the conclusion of this is, since we are so dependent on others, we benefit so much from what others do, then isn't it right that we feel grateful and treat them with kindness in return? Okay, so I wanted to go on and start talking about something else. There's a text by Nagarjuna. Nagarjuna is a great Indian master who lived about 400 years after the Buddha. And he's most famous for his writings on the topic of emptiness, which are quite mind-blowing and mind-expanding and difficult to understand. But it seems he's also written some texts on themes like bodhicitta and love and compassion. I never heard of this text before, but it's some of these verses are in Volume 5, again, in Praise of Great Compassion. And so the text is called A Tale of a Wish-Fulfilling Dream. And it's really beautiful. I can share it with you. I downloaded it. It was translated by Geshe-ma Kelsang Wangmo together with some of her teachers, and you can download it from the IBD, Institute of Buddhist Dialect. It has the Tibetan as well as the English, so you can study it. And so right at the beginning of the text, he says, he will teach a few methods for growing fond of sentient beings. And then he proceeds with these verses. So I'm just going to share 5 of the verses. These are the main ones about how to have more fondness, more kindness, we could say, for sentient beings. So this verse says, I and all sentient beings are equal with regard to happiness and suffering. Being equal with regard to happiness and suffering, we are family. It is not right to completely abandon these beings, yet enter Nirvana. So this is the first line about how we and all other beings are equal with regard to happiness and suffering. Means we are all the same in wanting happiness, wanting good experiences, and not wanting suffering, pain, bad experiences. So this is a very common reflection we are advised to do. It's mainly, it mainly comes up in meditation on to develop equanimity, to equalize ourselves with others. So you're probably familiar with it. You probably encountered it there. That it's kind of a simple idea in a way, but it's very profound if we really contemplate it. And it can also be very helpful in a practical sense. For example, sometimes I'll meet a person or see a person that I feel a bit frightened, like the way they appear. Very different from me and behaving in ways that I don't feel completely comfortable with. So I do feel sometimes uneasy with certain people. But if I contemplate, this is another person, another human being, basically just like me. Inside of them, they just want to be happy. They're just trying to find happiness, good experiences, and they're trying to avoid suffering and pain and bad experiences. So contemplating that kind of dissolves this sense of separation and barrier and lessens the fear that sometimes comes just because of strangeness. The person looks strange or different. But contemplating this really helps to feel a sense of commonality with the other person. So it's a meditation you can do, similar to the one done earlier with loving kindness, bringing to mind individual people, and then just focusing on that person and thinking, this is another person just like me. They want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. Or whatever way you want to phrase that. So it really helps us to feel closer. And then Nagarjuna goes on to say, because of this, we are family. We are family, which is quite interesting. Because we all grow up in families. In my family, there were 5 of us, 5 kids. Sometimes it was painful, but we had a lot of fun too. It's kind of fun having siblings. And you just feel close to those people, you know, just spending that time together, living in the same house and eating together and doing things together and going on trips together and so on. It just engenders a sense of closeness. Um, so the sharing of experiences with other people. Same with here, like in this community. Here, it's like a family, not related by blood, but related by living together, having the same aspirations, same lifestyle, wishes, and so on. And yeah, just sharing experiences, you feel closer to people. Why shouldn't we have that same kind of feeling with other people outside of our own family? I was thinking about how it's just because of certain causes and conditions that we happen to be born in that family and not in the family next door. We could have been born in the family next door, you know, things had been a little different. And then we would have grown up in that family and we would have felt close to those people because of shared experiences, right? So if things had been a little different, then we would have been in another family and felt close to those people. So it's kind of arbitrary who we feel close to. And I think what Nagarjuna is saying here is, you know, if we think about this common theme or this common denominator that we all have, we are all living beings, or even if we just say human beings, maybe it's hard to think of spiders and mosquitoes, but human beings. Think of all the human beings, and there are certain things we all have in common, especially this planet. You know, we're all inhabiting this planet, and we all are trying to survive and trying to be happy, have good experiences, fulfill our needs and our wishes, trying to avoid dying and having horrible experiences, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things we have in common. And if we familiarize with that way of thinking, then we can come to feel we are all like family, human family. The Dalai Lama talks about that. He says wherever he goes, he sees people, he feels everybody's like his brother and sister. So he spent probably a lot of time contemplating these kind of points and come to that natural, spontaneous feeling. And we can also contemplate other things we have in common. Like we all come into this world as tiny, helpless babies, crying and hungry, wanting affection and attention. So we all start off like that. Our tears are all salty, our blood is red. We don't want to lose it. We suffer when our body is cut and wounded. And I think I've read genetically in terms of our genes, we're 99% identical, something like that. So this whole idea of race, different races, is just a myth. It's been thrown out the window. So there's lots of things we have in common, and focusing on those, thinking about those, really helps to feel closer to others and open our hearts to others with kindness. And then the last line says, it's not right to completely abandon these beings and enter nirvana. So this is referring to some Buddhist practitioners, some followers of the Buddha, aspire to free themselves from samsara. Does everyone know what samsara is? You're familiar with that term? Yeah, the cycle of dying and being reborn under the control of karma and afflictions. So it's a real drag. It's a real horrible situation. So some followers of the Buddha, their goal is to get out of samsara, to become free of samsara and attain nirvana. And the Buddha did teach that path. It is a valid path, a valid goal for those who want to attain it. But then other followers of the Buddha feel not quite right about that, just going to nirvana and leaving behind all the other sentient beings. So Nagarjuna is in that class of people, and we are too, Mahayana. So Mahayana Buddhism, that's the idea, is don't just free yourself from samsara, but work to free all sentient beings, get everybody out of samsara. So this is the Bodhisattva's path, the path to Buddhahood, to enlightenment. And so the way of thinking is that, yeah, just like me, all the other beings who are stuck in samsara, they don't want to suffer. They want to be free of suffering. They want to be happy and peaceful. And they have the ability. Buddhism, at least Mahayana Buddhism, says every living being has the ability, the capacity to become free of samsara and to reach enlightenment. So I want to help them do it. I don't want to leave them behind. So it's a bit like, if you imagine you and your family were imprisoned in a prison camp or a concentration camp, really horrible place. And of course, you all want to get out. And if you find a way to get out and you just walk away and leave your family there in the concentration camp, I mean, that wouldn't feel right, right? You wouldn't feel good about that. So that's the way of thinking. If you do generate this sense that we are all like family, we are all the same in certain ways. Of course, we are different in other ways. We do have our own individual bodies and our minds and our karma, but there's so much we have in common. And so focusing on that and getting this sense of we're all like family. I can't leave my family behind in samsara and just go to nirvana by myself. Okay, so there's 4 other verses, but I'll leave them for tomorrow. And so in these verses, Nagarjuna is providing reasons for developing kindness, compassion, concern for others. And I think, probably all religions do talk about love and kindness and these positive qualities that we try to act out in relation to others. But I'm not sure if all religions explain reasons why to do that. And this might be a unique feature. I haven't studied all the other religions, but this might be a unique feature of Buddhism, that there's reasons for generating these positive qualities. And I think that's quite effective. You might think, well, it's just the right thing to do, being loving and kind and helpful to others. It's the right thing to do. Or Jesus said so, or Muhammad said so, or whatever. So that might be enough for you to work on being more kind and generous and so forth. But if there's actual reasons, good solid reasons that you contemplate, you think about and get convinced in, then your wish to be more kind and compassionate and helpful is going to be stronger, more firm. And I recall the Dalai Lama talking about how we do naturally feel love for certain people, like our family. Yeah, most families love each other, but our love is usually limited to just those people. And there's like a certain number of people we feel love for and we feel compassion for and so on, but we don't feel love for others. But in Buddhism, what we're trying to do is cultivate love and kindness and compassion for everybody, for all living beings, which is challenging. It's hard. And so these are reasons, these kind of reasons to think about, to contemplate why we should feel love even for strangers, even for Putin and his generals, and they're bombing the Ukrainians who we care about. We don't want them to suffer. So why are those people? So even people like that, there are reasons for cultivating love and kindness and compassion for them. So it becomes more powerful and effective in generating those feelings.